My dream car is the Carrera GT. That's the top car for me.
Walker died Saturday when the Porsche he was riding in crashed and burst into flames.
Paul Walker's daughter has filed a wrongful death suit against Porsche.
I'm not a race car driver, and I had an accident because I wasn't good enough for the car. Driving's like sex. All men think they're good at it, and they're not.
This is the Porsche Carrera GT, often called the last great analog supercar, but it is probably best known for a much darker and heartbreaking reason.
The crash left the mangled car unrecognizable.
Many see the Carrera GT as a death trap, shocked by pictures of wrecked cars and high-profile accidents. But is it really true? Is the Carrera GT a deadly machine hell-bent on ending lives? Or is it the most misunderstood car of our generation?
Long before a Porsche was called a Porsche, we believed any car that merely got you from here to there just didn't go far enough. That belief, a little imagination, and a lot of hard work led us to build cars that set new speed records, set new design standards, set new expectations of what a car ought to be.
Porsches of old were known for one thing besides their style and driving enjoyment: their total lack of balance. The first 911 was plagued with oversteer issues, the rear-mounted engine the culprit. Porsche even added bumper reinforcement to early models to add weight to the front end. But there is a lesson from these early cars that is important to our story. In the hands of an experienced and well-educated driver, those early 911s were predictable, they were fast, and above all else, they were exciting. It is this excitement that brought the Carrera GT into existence, a raw race car for the road that demanded respect but delivered in style, a stark contrast to the trends of the era. The early 90s and late noughties saw a host of computers, gizmos and gadgets enter our cars. From stability control and keyless entry to self-closing doors and parking sensors, cars were getting more digital and less mechanical every year. For purists and driving enthusiasts, this technology was not welcomed. They wanted to feel the road with every turn, control every gear change, and become one with the car. And when F1-style gearboxes found their way into supercars, the old days of an all-analog race car for the road, built for the driver, seemed a distant memory. But Porsche wanted one last crack at it before the final nail was driven into the analog coffin. In the 1980s, Porsche was making engines for Formula 1. Their turbo V6 made 1,000 horsepower thanks to its genius designer, Hans Metzger. But the turbo ban of 1989 would lead Metzger to a new engine, a naturally aspirated V12 that was a literal welding together of two previously used V6s. But it was a rare miss for Metzger and Porsche. The V12 was heavy, lacked output, and had a knack of exploding. So Porsche did what Porsche always does. They tried to make what they already had work. Porsche and change, two words that don't belong in the same sentence. But this time, it did not work out. The revised V12 let them down. Its principal engineer had protested against the engine from the get-go. He knew it was too large, too heavy, and no amount of tweaking would solve it. They needed to make a new engine, a new design. Herbert needed to make his own Formula 1 engine. It would be a 3.5-litre V10 with a 14,800 RPM redline, 760 horsepower, and unlike the V12, it wouldn't explode. It was the perfect engine for Porsche and Formula 1. But it would never see the light of day. This special engine would lie alone in a crate, stuffed at the back of a warehouse where it would become dormant. In the meantime, Porsche had spent the 90s winning on track. GT1 was their playground. Competing against icons like the McLaren F1 GTR, Porsche would cement their hold on the series. But changes in regulations meant the GT class would begin to lack the competitive edge it had enjoyed. Porsche needed a new platform if they wished to hold on to their top spot in the sport. Their prototype would be known as the LMP 2000. For this design, Porsche needed something new, a fresh approach, up to the challenge of extreme endurance racing. There's something new would be found in a warehouse, long since forgotten in time, gathering dust, a vision for the ultimate engine that was never realized. Herbert's 3.5-litre V10. Without the restrictions of Formula 1, Porsche forged an evolution of the beast. Its displacement was increased to over 5 litres, and with some valve train modifications, the once dormant engine was ready to roar. In the LMP 2000, the V10 would set a new lap record in testing, but times were changing, not just at Porsche, but in the world at large. The 2000s would see a new segment take over passenger car sales, and Porsche's CEO wanted in on the action. There was just one issue: where could he get the funds? Well, in his mind, Porsche had already completed Le Mans. He didn't need another win. What it needed was a win on the streets. So funding for the LMP 2000 was pulled and sent to a little project named after a chili. But our engine would get one more chance to shine. This period of time saw a golden age for supercars verging on hypercars. Enzo Ferrari would have a car built to honor his legacy. McLaren would help Mercedes with a Formula 1-inspired road car, and the age-old moniker of Bugatti was set for a new awakening. Porsche could not let this call go unanswered, so they threw their hat into the ring. They had an engine. They had times a charm for Herbert's V10, and they also happened to have a design, the street-legal version of their GT1 car, the 911 GT1 Strassen version. Their task was to mate these together into a race car for the road that would trump the competition. The V10 would be enlarged yet again, this time to 5.7 litres, the largest engine in any Porsche. The tub would come from the same place Ferrari got their Enzo tub, an all-carbon fibre affair. Suspension was handled by Le Mans-style push rods, crammed nicely below the windscreen. The Carrera GT shared nothing with the Porsches of old, except a few 996 interior parts. The Carrera GT was a completely new approach. Its beechwood shifter a throwback to its racing past, and a reminder of one of the car's more unique touches, the Carrera GT's clutch. It was half the size and weight of a conventional clutch and had no flywheel. This was an innovative workaround to a problem that V10 engine brought with it. The dry sump in the V10 meant no oil pan hanging off the bottom of the engine. This meant the clutch casing would determine how low the car's height could be. This allowed Porsche to drop the engine and gearbox low into the frame, reducing its center of gravity and improving its handling. But this is where the story of the Carrera GT changes.
What was the last thing you heard Paul say?
I'll be right back. That was the last thing Paul said.
The Carrera GT was plagued by handling issues. At the press launch, a Carrera GT was written off, maybe at the hands of an inexperienced driver. Remember the Porsches of old? In the hands of an experienced and well-educated driver, they were predictable. Maybe this was a one-off. Another Carrera GT was also allegedly written off in testing by rally legend and two-time world champion Walter Roll. He would go on to say, "It was the first car in my life that I drive, and I feel scared." Let's just really listen to that. Walter Roll, two-time world rally champion and Le Mans winner. So the Carrera was the first car he had ever driven, including bonkers Group B cars banned for their death toll, that had ever scared him. Now maybe this was a testing issue, a bug in the Carrera system that was fixed in the production car. But the list of accidents doesn't end there. Jay Leno would fall foul of the true analog nature of Porsche's creation. With no driver aids, world-renowned talk show host and car collector Leno would lift off the throttle before entering a corner, something he knows not to do, but in that moment, he did. The sudden shift in weight lifted the back end, spinning Leno 5 times at over 190 miles per hour. He would walk away, as would this driver of a mangled Carrera GT, who tried to take advantage of lockdown traffic but ultimately failed. But one person who didn't walk away would change the story of the Carrera GT forever. November 30th, 2013. Santa Clarita, California. Paul Walker attended an event on Alta Vista Avenue, set up by his charity to help the survivors of a typhoon in the Philippines.
200-mile-an-hour wind.
The strongest storms ever to tear across the ocean.
Typhoon Haiyan.
As we all know, the devastation in the Philippines it's catastrophic, and the race to relief is ongoing.
Here, at ever-evolving motorsport, with his friend, business partner, and race car driver Roger Rodas, Paul interacted with fans and raised awareness for his charity's efforts in the Philippines. After the event, Paul decided to go for a drive with Rodas in his red 2005 Porsche Carrera GT, one of many cars in the owner's possession, and a car Walker had never had the chance to be in. The California sun presented a near-perfect driving environment for such a car, and a chance for Walker to realize one of his dreams. With Rodas in the driver's seat and Paul Walker beside him, the pair set off and made a right turn onto Constellation Road before their final right turn, placing them here on Kelly Johnson Parkway, a sweeping section liked by drifters and street racers with a speed limit of 45 miles per hour. With the Porsche pointing up Kelly Johnson Parkway, Rodas began to accelerate. The streets empty on a weekend, and with warm weather, the danger seemed minimal. But as the car climbed to around 100 miles per hour, disaster was about to strike the pair. Heading into a sweeping right bend, the car should have been more than capable of handling what Rodas requested of it. But there were two things that he didn't account for. Heading into the bend at 100 miles per hour, the Porsche's back end gave way. It started to slide, oversteering as it struggled for grip. The Porsche would hit a curb and then a lamppost before slamming into a tree, causing catastrophic damage to the car and its occupants. But Walker was still alive. Somehow, after those impacts at high speed, Paul was breathing. An injured Paul Walker is now trapped in the mangled Porsche. The quiet streets that made a fast drive inviting had now turned this situation into a deadly one. With nobody around to help and with time ticking by, it was only a matter of time. Fuel ignited under the car, engulfing it in a ball of fire. But this story doesn't end at 3:30 p.m. on November 30th, 2013. As Walker and Rodas climbed into the Carrera GT, a domino effect was set in motion that would shift the blame away from the Porsche. You see, the Carrera GT in question was a recent purchase by Rodas, himself a highly experienced driver. In fact, both Roger and Paul had plenty of experience in race cars and fast road cars. The Carrera arrived from a long-term collector with just 3,500 miles on the clock and a striking red and black color scheme. It made the 2005 Carrera GT a must-have piece. But this is where the first domino falls. With such low mileage, having been sat stationary for so long, the newly acquired car was still sat on its original tyres, 9-year-old Michelins, a tyre that would be replaced long after the car ceased production, for we had moved for a safe tyre on a car nobody made anymore. But it wasn't the only domino in play. The corner in question is a fast one. It could be taken at that speed in a regular car. For a Porsche in the hands of an experienced and conservative driver, it should have been safe. Well, as safe as it could be given the public road environment. But there is one aspect about this particular spot that could have caused the whole thing. Right on the corner, there is a slight dip, not something a regular car would feel or react to. But with the low ground clearance of the Carrera GT and its hard suspension setup, this dip at 100 miles per hour would have lifted the car, potentially causing the initial loss of traction and starting a spin the driver could not recover on old tyres. The official cause of death was dangerous driving, which it was, but the circumstances are much more complex. What played out after their deaths was more lawsuits naming Porsche and the Carrera GT. You see, this wasn't the first death and lawsuit for the Porsche Carrera. In June 2006, at California Speedway, a Carrera GT span out whilst trying to avoid another car entering the track. It slammed into a wall and killed both the driver and passenger, a wall that had been moved closer to the track to accommodate a recent NASCAR event. In the lawsuit that followed, everyone was to blame, but some key findings came from it. Most notably, the Porsche was not cleared to run. In fact, the safety inspector had noted the car's handling and raised serious doubts about its participation in the event. The car had already spun several times at earlier events. The lawsuit claimed Porsche knew the car was unsafe and that not fitting it with stability control contributed to the crash. It was noted that during its development, the Carrera GT had exhibited a tendency to oversteer during high lateral acceleration. Porsche made some adjustments, but it did not fully correct the problem, which explained why the mechanic who drove the car reported handling problems. Stability control would have helped correct the tail-happy oversteer response to the driver's steering input to avoid the Ferrari, but no system would save any car at over 100 miles per hour from such sudden movements. Porsche would contribute 8% of the $4.5 million settlement in this incident. The lawyer for the claimant made a statement in 2007, 6 years before the events involving Walker and Rodas. He thought that Porsche's greatest exposure in this regard may not be crashes on racetracks, but what might happen on the street. Imagine a Carrera GT driver who gets in over his head on a public road. The rear end comes around and he spins into an oncoming car, killing its occupant. Faced with expert testimony that electronic stability control could have prevented the spin, what would the jury think? For Rodas and Walker, it wasn't another road user, but a tree that ultimately stopped the spinning Porsche. Stability control could have maybe prevented it, or at least reduced the loss of control, but that wasn't what the purists or Porsche wanted. The Carrera GT was an unapologetic throwback to the truly analog days of man and machine, a car that demanded to be driven, but a car that demanded respect from its drivers. Two of the crashes we mentioned were driver error. In the Walker incident, the tyres and road played a huge part, and the other was a combination of factors. Not one single incident that we've covered is solely down to the Carrera GT. Yes, Porsche created a monster, something they have done quite often, but if it was driven properly in the right setting, it is no more deadly than any other mid-engined 600 horsepower plus supercar. Its deadly flaw then was not anything specific. If anything, its deadly flaw was trusting us to drive it sensibly and in the right environment. Why not check out this video that YouTube thinks you will love? You won't want to miss it. And whilst you're here, why not subscribe to the channel if you like this video so you can catch more in the future.